Thought you missed me, didn't you? We're talking about weathering products and techniques, as well as viewer comments and questions and much more on Ron's Trains and Things Live right now. Hi, I'm Ron of Ron's Trains and Things, and if you'd like to see more model railroad tips, tools, and techniques, then be sure and subscribe down below and click that little bell icon so you can catch future videos. I want to welcome you to another monthly live stream here on Ron's Trains and Things. I'm very excited to be with you this evening, and we're going to talk a little bit about a few weathering ideas and techniques, as well as taking your comments and questions and visiting about several other things over the course of the next hour. So I'm glad that you're here. If you're watching this on the replay, I hope you'll go ahead and give this video a watch. I think you're going to find some techniques, some products that'll be helpful to you. And we always have some great interaction from the chat. And so I'm looking forward to some good questions there, and we'll try to respond to those to the very best that we can. It's a Monday evening, and I don't know how Mondays go for you, but it's gone about like a typical Monday for me. I got a haircut this evening, which means that I either look fantastic or I look completely ridiculous. I'm not sure which. Also, kind of a Monday odd thing. I came home today, and I live in a small town, and I don't know if you're used to small town life. And I don't know if where you are, you're used to having problems with your neighbors' pets, their dogs, their cats getting in your yard, causing problems, leaving you little presents. But I live in a small town, and so you got to expect the unexpected. I came home this afternoon to find my neighbor's goat grazing in my front yard. Yes, my neighbor's goat. And so we had a good time trying to corral. You ever try to corral a goat? That's a lot of fun. But anyway, we got through Monday, and I'm glad to be here with you this evening. Also want to tell you, as we go through the course of the evening, first couple of live streams I've done, I've been working on some good way of celebrating those who share super chats. I used that big ridiculous bell last month. That didn't work at all. I've got something new this month, and you'll see it a little later in the show whenever we have some super chats to share. But we're going to be recognizing those mostly in the second half of the show. So if you give one early, we're going to recognize you, but probably just a little bit later. I want to talk just a little bit about weathering. I've been talking about that subject a lot recently, not only around my channel and in some conversations that I have, but also in some other places where I've done some live streams on Facebook through Model Railroad Academy and some other conversations. And I just seem to keep coming back to it. So I thought we'd talk about it a little bit this evening. I'm really interested for you to share with us in the chat this evening. Number one, what is your attitude about weathering in general? I know some people really, really like weathering. Some people are just really don't like the idea of dirtying and rusting up their pristine models. So I'm interested to know what your thoughts about weathering in general are. And I'm also interested to know about some of the techniques that you really like to use, whether you're talking about weathering rolling stock or structures or scenery, whatever the case may be. Tell me what you like and what you think. I'm going to talk just a little tonight specifically about weathering with washes. And I want to talk about this because this is something I've been in the process of doing. And in fact, you're going to see the results of some of that in my video this week, which should come out sometime tomorrow. So I hope that you will watch for that. In fact, you'll get a little bit of preview of that in just a little bit. I have used washes for years as one of a whole bunch of weathering techniques that I use. But recently I've done some new things, used some new products with regard to those washes and weathering with them. And I want to share some of those with you this evening. In the past, I've used some acrylic washes and other kinds of washes, and I had kind of mixed results, but these new products have gotten me really a much better result. So I want to share a few of those with you this evening. One of the products that I have used for a very long time in using washes to weather, and that is India ink. Now you can buy India ink in a little jar, kind of like this, at about any art supply store, hobby supply store, any place that sells products with regard to like calligraphy or art. you'll find India ink. And to make an India ink wash, this little bottle will go a long way, because I put about a half a teaspoon of India ink in a full pint of isopropyl alcohol, right on the back. India ink. Not that I have to tell; it's jet black. I can kind of tell what it is. But I use India ink washes. I've used them for a long time on a lot of things. I've used them on rolling stock. I've used them on locomotives. I always use them whenever I'm coloring and weathering rocks. It's one of my favorite techniques. And what the India ink wash will do is being very, very thin with that isopropyl alcohol, it will get into the little nooks and crannies and kind of bring out give some relief and some definition to those 3D parts of your model. And then the alcohol evaporates very, very quickly. It leaves just the ink in those little places. And it really gives some definition and some detail to those little parts of whether you're talking about a model or whether you're talking about rocks. I don't use India ink as much anymore on models as I do on rocks, because I found some other products that I really like. And one of those that I've been using a lot lately is panel liners. This particular one is from AK Interactive, and these products were specifically made, the AK Interactive products like this one, specifically made for military modelers, but that doesn't exclude model railroaders from using them. This is a black, or I think black or very, very dark gray panel liner, and these are great for getting into those little nooks and crannies, but you use a little different technique for those, and that's part of what I want to talk about this evening is the difference in technique of using these different kinds of washes. Before we get to that, I want to show you one other wash that I found recently, and I'll tell you where I learned about this in a little bit, because I want to kind of give a clue to you that might help some of you out. This is from MiG Ammo, and this is called Streaking Grime. And this is a great wash to use as you're weathering rolling stock, because this is a kind of a dark brown color, kind of a combination rust and grime color. And you can apply this generally to the side of a piece of rolling stock, let it set for just a few moments, and then take your brush and streak it down the sides, and you get some great streaking effects. And then, of course, you can remove as little or as much of the wash as you want to get the effect that you like. Now, these washes that I've shown you tonight are all enamel based washes, not acrylic. When I was early and young in my model railroading career, as I was just learning, I tried my hand at some acrylic washes. I've heard of people using some of those. And I'll be honest, I never had really good success with those. I didn't really get them to streak and run and do the things that I wanted them to do. The enamel washes seem to work much better. Number one, as they're thinned, they get down into all those little details really well. But most importantly, enamel washes are great because you can reactivate them with your thinner and continue to work with them for not only hours, but sometimes even days after you have applied them. It takes a very, very long time for an artist oil or an enamel to fully cure. And so you can use mineral spirits, or my favorite thinner is terpenoid. This is an odorless turpentine substitute. And you can use that and reactivate that enamel and continue to work with it until you get exactly the effect that you want. And so that's one of the reasons I like the enamels. You can make your own washes as well, just by using some artist's oils. Some I like to use for a variety of things. And like here's a burnt umber and a raw sienna. You can take these, just a little bit of this in a mixing palette, and put a little bit of your thinner in, your terpenoid or odorless mineral spirits, and mix them together and thin it down to a wash. And you can make your own washes that you can apply with artist's oils as well. There are a couple of different ways to apply washes as you're talking about using them for weathering. And I'm going to tilt the camera down to my table for just a minute. So, prepare yourself if you get motion sick. Here we go. A couple of different ways that we can apply washes to use them for weathering. The first is what we would consider a general application. In this case, I've got a rock that I've painted gray. This is a darker gray than I normally would use, but I've got a gray color here, and I've got just a little bit of that India ink solution in this bowl. And whenever I apply India ink to a rock, number one, if you're working with India ink, be very careful with it. This stuff will stain anything it touches. And to know just how crazy I am, right now I am working over my wife's white carpet. Okay, is anybody nervous besides me? All right. Anyway, to a general application, you just take your wash and apply it to the surface, and you just want to cover everything and then let it run. And as you set this up, you see there's a lot of ink on that, but as that dries, it's going to continue to run down, and the ink is mostly going to stay in the little nooks and crannies and detailed recesses, and is going to give you some nice relief and detail. That's a general wash application. The problem with a general wash application can be this: if you're talking about a model or a structure, whenever you're using something, a dark wash like India ink, a general wash is going to impact the color of the entire model. Even though this India ink is mostly going to stay in those little nooks and crannies, some of it's going to stay on the surface, and this rock is going to come out darker than it was when I started. So if you've got a model that is the color that you want, and you don't want to darken the color of the entire model, you just want to give some relief to those little details, then there's another way of applying a wash that may be better for you. And that's what I want to show you now. I'm going to put this one away, and I'm going to bring out, y'all watched me build that bridge. If you've kept up with my videos recently, that highway overpass, this is a piece of one of those decks that I had left over from that. And I'm going to show you how to do a pin wash, which is a way of getting the wash into those little details without coloring the whole model. And I'm using my panel liner for this. And now this is an in-scale model, so this is very fine detail, but even larger scales, you're going to want a very, very small brush to work with. I'm working tonight with a round 18-aught brush, and this is a regular round brush. You might even want to try a spotter brush, which is similar. It would be the same size, except it would have shorter bristles. That could be very handy too. And what I want to do here is I want to get just a little bit of the wash on my brush, and then I'm going to come in. I'm just going to touch the detail and allow capillary action to pull the wash into those nooks and crannies and details. I'm just holding it there for a moment. Now, I know it left a black spot there. We'll come back to see that, but you can see how capillary action is already pulling that wash down into those details. I'll come up here and do another spot. Let's get just a little more on here, and we'll do this spot here and just allow capillary action to pull it down. Now, those spots that are in the middle, we're going to take care of those in just a moment. Those are not going to stay there. That's just part of the process. But with a pin wash, I'm just going to apply in pin points the wash in a few of these places and allow it to flow into the detail, like so. Now, we're going to have to hurry this process a little bit. Normally, I would let that sit for several minutes and let it begin to dry, but I don't have so much time right now because we're live. So now I'm going to come back with, I've got just a little bit of my terpenoid in this bottle, and this is a 10-aught flat shaper brush. Okay, so it's a flat bristled brush, and got a little paint on it. I'm going to get a little of my terpenoid, and then I'm going to come and I'm going to dab most of it off. I just want my brush to be just damp with the terpenoid, and I'm going to come and I'm going to carefully brush away the bits that I don't want. As you do this, you want to clean your brush and then dry it regularly. Otherwise, you'll just be smearing the paint around. which is not what you want. We're just going to pull away a little of that paint that we don't want. Again, this is actually better done if it's had a few more minutes to set, because if it's real wet, you can pull the paint back out of the detail. I'm being real careful, try not to do that tonight, but normally you might want to let that sit 10 or 15 minutes maybe even. But you get the idea there. As I pull that away, you see you got a nice defined detail. If you look down here, you can't even hardly see that line where it is down here. But here, it really stands out. And yet we've been able to clean away a lot of the wash off of the surface and really make that look pretty good. So pen washes are a great way to bring out detail in a model. Okay, I'm going to tilt my camera back up, so get ready. Here we go. All right. I want to tell you about a couple of people who are some great resources as you talk about weathering. And these are folks who are on YouTube, and you can find some of their information by way of video. Sorry about that. There we go. You can find them on YouTube. One of them he's absolutely known for the work that he does in weathering, and that is Ralph Renzetti. Now, Ralph has his own YouTube channel, and you can find some information there. But last year, he did a series of videos for YouTube model builders about weathering, and it was called Workbench to Mainline. And so if you're interested in learning about some weathering, I'd encourage you to go over to YouTube Model Builders and check out that series that Ralph did. And you'll learn a number of great techniques from somebody who really is a master at the art of weathering. Somebody else who's new and who I really want to give a shout out to this evening, and I want to encourage you to check him out, and that is John Crowdis. Now, last winter, whenever I held my Down and Dirty weathering contest, John was one of the entrants. And in fact, I believe John won second place in the Down and Dirty weathering contest, if I'm not mistaken. And as a result of doing that weathering and making those videos, John has started his own YouTube channel. It's called JC's Rip Track. And he specifically is doing a series of videos on weathering. I think he has 3 of those videos up now, and he's been, over the last few weeks, publishing those pretty regularly, and they are really, really good. So I want to encourage you to go check out JC's Rip Track. If you've not found him, go check him out after this live stream is over and subscribe to him. If you're interested in weathering, John's going to really, really help you out. They're not in the description now, but if you're watching this on the playback, I will put links both to YouTube Model Builders and to JC's Rip Track in the description down below, so you can find those there after this video is over with. I want to take your comments and questions about weathering and such in just a moment, but I want to give a couple more shout outs, if that's the right word this evening. A couple of people I want to mention. First person I want to mention is Bradley. And I'm going to tell you just a little bit of a story. When I first started my channel about a year and a half ago, it was in the spring. It was in April. My wife is a school teacher. My oldest son was a senior in high school. And it became kind of known around school that I had started a YouTube channel, and especially among my son's friends who were athletes that he was playing baseball with at the time. A lot of them kind of became aware of the channel and actually became early subscribers to the channel. And one of them in particular, by the name of Bradley, has continued to be a great follower and a great supporter of my channel. Today, I took my youngest son to school, and I dropped him off. I was driving by the school, and from half a block away, I saw a Ron's Trains and Things t-shirt getting ready to step into the crosswalk, and I knew immediately who it was. So I pulled up to the crosswalk and rolled down my window and kind of gave him a shout. It was Bradley. Bradley is such a great fan and a great supporter of the channel that he will tell you, and he tells me regularly, I was number 35. He was my 35th subscriber. I just broke 11,000 subscribers this last week, which is very exciting. But Bradley, thanks for your support. I really appreciate you, and you keep wearing that Ron's Trains and Things t-shirt, man. You look good in it. You look good in it. Now, if I can take a moment to do something just a little more serious, and then we're going to come back to our weathering topic in a little bit. As you know, in August of this year, I had the opportunity to attend the National Model Railroad Association convention and the National Train Show. And while I was there, I had the privilege of meeting a lot of people who were subscribers and followers of the channel, a lot of people who I have known from afar in model railroading that I got to meet in person. And one of the people that I had visited with but never met, looked forward to meeting at the convention, was Lionel Strang. Not too long before that, I had interviewed with him for his podcast, A Modeler's Life. And it was Monday of the convention that I ran into Lionel. In fact, actually, Lionel kind of ran into me. And Lionel just had this group of guys around him who were all part of his Modeler's Life machine, if you will. They're all connected to and involved with the Modeler's Life podcast. One of those guys that I met for the first time, I did not know at all until the convention, and his name was Stewart Sterling. Stewart's a great guy. He's from Alaska, drives a semi-truck for UPS. Was a great photographer and was, all week long, he was showing off, not in an arrogant way, but showing us, photos that he had taken. He's taken some beautiful shots up there in Alaska of the Aurora Borealis and, the Northern Lights, and he drives at night. So he's got some great photos of his truck with the Northern Lights, in the background. Took some fantastic photos at the convention, many of which he shared on Facebook and such. I got the news last week that a little over a week ago, Stewart, who was only 54 years old, had a massive stroke, and from complications of that stroke, sadly passed away. That was pretty shocking news. I didn't know Sterling I didn't know him for very long, and I didn't get the chance to get to know him nearly as well as I would have liked. But I really value the fact that I got to meet him, and that event or series of events has just been a reminder to me, number one, of what's really most important, even in this hobby. One of the reasons I started this YouTube channel is because I've always kind of lived in a small town, and as far as model railroading is concerned, I've always been a little isolated, and I really wanted the opportunity to get to know some model railroaders, and that has been a great asset, a great value to this channel for me, is getting to meet and get to know some great model railroaders like Stewart. And also, it's been a reminder to me of the importance of taking time to not take things for granted, and taking time to recognize the value of every day, of every moment, of every event. I absolutely loved every minute of the time that I got to spend at the convention and the train show this year, and the people that I met, and the things I was able to do there. But this, very tragic moment in time has just reminded me of the great value of those people and those new friendships that I've made there, as well as through this channel. So I just want to say all that to say, first of all, I'm thankful for all of you that I've been able to connect with. You make comments, you connect with me on Facebook and other social media, and we have conversations back and forth. Many of you I've gotten to meet in different places, the convention and other places, and I really appreciate that. And I just want to encourage you not to take those things for granted, but to always always realize the great value of those things. If you don't already listen regularly to a Modeler's Life podcast, I want to encourage you to check it out. And I especially would encourage you to take the time to listen to the podcast that was uploaded today, which was a memorial of the Modeler's Life guys talking about Stewart. And you can find that at their website, modelerslife.com. I believe I got that right. And I think maybe Lionel is watching this evening. And Lionel, I just want to tell you, I appreciate what you did there in that podcast, and it was meaningful to me, and I know even more so to you who knew Stewart better than I did. So anyway, we'll move on from there as we get back to the topic a little bit. Let's talk a little bit more about weathering, and we'll try to see if we can't take some comments and questions from the audience here. By the way, I also want to mention, I don't want to forget, as I'm giving some shout outs tonight, I want to recognize this evening the two best moderators in all of YouTube, and I've got them here on my channel, and that is Eric at IMRROCom and Stephen at Midwest Model Railroad. I thank you guys for all of your help tonight, and we'll move on from there. Okay, let's see. Eric says, sad. I've not heard this story. Yeah, this, of course, it just happened. Just happened in the last week. So, ContainerMan68, Roy, good to have you in here tonight. Says it's a great loss losing a fellow truck driver. Yeah, absolutely. And a great guy. Joe G says, Stewart was an amazing guy and a great contributor to the Alaska Railroad. Yes, indeed, he was. In fact, he was at the convention giving away hats, Alaska Railroad hats up there. So Dustin's In-Scale Railroad says it's amazing how close a group of railroaders are. Many of us never meet, but we consider each other brothers and sisters. And that is so true. And I can tell you, I've made some great friends in the model railroading community through this channel, and I really, really appreciate them. And two of the many of those are my moderators this evening. Let's see. Lionel Strang, he is in here tonight. Tragic loss. That is so true, Lionel, and welcome. I'm glad that you could join us this evening. I think back on the topic here. Father Jay Finelli says, some people don't want to weather. We're back to the weathering topic here. Is there something you can use that can later be removed by cleaning the shell? Now, I'm not so sure what that would be, but I will tell you this. And if you don't want to weather and dirty and rust up your cars, but you want to give them a little more realistic look than that shiny new out of the box look. By the way, this was something I was going to mention. We'll come back to talking about these cars in just a minute, but I'm going to show you one as I pull it out of the box here. This is a brand new car, and if you look at it as I kind of move it back and forth in the light, you see it's just very shiny and plastic toy looking. One thing that you can do, I put a few models back here behind me to show without dirtying the car, is just giving it a good coat of dull coat. That will take some of the shine off. It will take some of that kind of plastic toy look away from the model, make it look a little more realistic without dirtying it up. Now, you're not going to remove that, but you're also not adding grime and rust to the car. I've got some more things I'll show you back there before, but I think that we'll talk about those in response to some of these comments as we go. Welcome, by the way, Father Jay. Appreciate you being here this evening. Alexander Plathow. I hope I pronounced these right. I'm terrible at pronouncing people's last names, but welcome, Alexander. He says, does he do paint chipping effects? Oh, I'm so glad you asked. Do I have one handy? I don't have one right here with me, but yes, I do. That's a different technique, but I use artist oils to do the paint chipping technique by taking I've got a little tool that's a little piece of wire that I use mostly. You can also do it with a very small brush, and dabbing on just tiny spots of artist oils. Especially I like to use the burnt umber, that kind of give that dark rust color to it. Just dab that on in the spot that you want to make the chip, and let that dry for just a few minutes so it'll stick to the model, and then come back with a fine brush with a little turpenoid in it, and drag it down to kind of streak the rust away from the chip that I've applied with the artist oil. That's how I do chipping techniques. And I really thought I had one right here. I don't have one that has the chips, but this is similar. Well, yes, I do actually. Can you see this right here? If you look at this model right here, if we can get my camera to focus, maybe with this paper towel. There it is. If you can see right off the end of my finger there in the middle of that car. All right, focus, you silly camera. There it is. That's one of where I've made a scratch simulated in this car, and then just drug the streak down the side of the car. So that's how I do my chipping techniques. How would you weather a locomotive? I can do rolling stock, okay, but locomotives are where I struggle. Well, I mean, in a lot of ways, I do a locomotive in the same way that I do the car, as far as the body is concerned. The big differences, I guess, on a locomotive off the top of my head are including, black soot streaks or that kind of black soot grime along the roof. And for that, I usually use an airbrush and a flat black or kind of an oily black paint. Use it fairly thin in a small spray pattern, and spray those streaks on along the roof line. And you can also streak some of that same color down the sides. Often that will build up on the roof, and it will begin to streak down with the rain. There are some other great effects that are a little more advanced that I don't know that I can explain to you as well here, at least in the time that we have. But if you get really advanced in locomotives, simulating the impact of the heat of the motor as it bakes the paint and getting that kind of burnt look, or fading out specifically the lettering to the point of rusting. And you can do some of that rusting effect in the very same way that I did that chipping effect that I just showed you with artist oils, by carefully painting it over just the lettering, and then streaking it a little bit. You can get that same kind of effect. Are you thinking of a weathering video based on a loco? Kevin Knight, good to see you tonight from Australia. Welcome from the other corner of the planet. Yeah, I am actually. Not sure exactly when, but you've probably seen in my videos that Fort Worth and Western locomotive that I custom painted and super detailed, and I'm planning to weather that locomotive specifically for a video. Not sure exactly when that's going to be, but before too long. Roy, ContainerMan68. So a flat dull coat to car bodies. What about just adding a little dirt to the trucks and wheels and couplers? Yes, that's certainly, and I hadn't talked about that, but that's certainly something that you can do too. And again, even just that will make a big difference in the level of realism of a car. There are a number of ways of doing that. One of the things that can be really a bit of a challenge sometimes is weathering the side frames of the trucks, because they are an engineering plastic. It's difficult to get paint, especially acrylics, to stick to them. You can do a couple things there. You can use a primer that is I sometimes will coat them with a primer for polycarbonate, which will stick to those truck side frames a little bit better. A lot of times what I do is I just weather them with a paint pigment type of weathering powder. And you can scrub those into those truck side frames and usually get those to stick. Personally, I like Monroe Models paint weathering powders. And in fact, I think I've got a link to some of the Monroe Model weathering powders in the description down below in my pick of the week this week. I really like those paint pigments because they will stick better than pan pastels or artist pastels, which will just tend to wipe off and disappear. Also, wheels. I think one of the most important things to weathering is painting the insides of the wheels, and I do that with acrylics. I just use kind of a dark rusty color and a micro brush, and just a single swish around the face of the wheel. Adding that rust can make a big difference. JC's Rip Track. Good to see you, John. Glad you're here. He says, Ron, what is your preferred technique for dust and dirt? I don't know if I have a preferred technique. I have a few. Maybe the one that I use as much as anything just for general dust and dirt, I do with an airbrush. And I'm going to show you here. I'll show you two cars again. Here's a brand new car. I'm not going to worry about the focus too much there, but you see that's a brand new, bright yellow, shiny trailer train box car. And here is a rail box car that is the same color. But notice, first of all, that this has been painted with a wash, kind of like you would do a fade coat. Come on. There we go. Except the wash is a tan or dusty color. But also notice that there is more of the paint on the bottom part of the car than on the top part of the car to simulate dust and dirt that would get blown up and kicked up from alongside of the tracks. Wish I could get that to focus better. Anyway, I think you can see that there, how down at the bottom there's more of the dirt than there is up towards the top. Now, if you want more of a grimy effect, you can do that with by using artist oils and doing a general coverage with an artist oil, and then come back with a sponge. I use makeup sponges like this, and you see I've just torn bits off to make it kind of uneven and rough. Apply artist oil, a lot of times that burnt umber color, for example, and apply it, generally to the side, and then I just dampen a makeup sponge like this with my thinner, my Turpenoid, and then come back and dab it and take it off until I get the level of grime that I like. By the way, I'll mention again, John on his channel, JC's Rip Track, just did a video on doing a fade coat using artist oils without an airbrush, using a color dot technique, which I've seen before, and he has some really, really good results with that. So I'd encourage you to check that video out. Lionel, very cool stuff. Can Ron get a refund for the haircut? I wish. I paid too much for it. I'll just send the bill to you, Lionel. I know you'll reimburse me. Alexander Platt, have you painted brass? And if so, how do you prep it? Alexander, I have never done anything with well, that's not fully true. I've never done any like brass locomotives or rolling stock. I have used some brass parts, some etched brass detail parts. And for those, honestly, for the most part, I clean them really good, and then I just prime them and paint them. I know there's more that you would want to do if you were talking about like a full brass locomotive or large brass surfaces, but that's not a process that I've used much, so I can't tell you a lot about that. I know there's some videos on YouTube that can help you with that. I'm sorry that I can't tell you more. Hardy Johnson, can you do couplers in all rust couplers? In all rust. Okay, I'm going to get it right in a minute. Can you do couplers in all rust color? Yes, what I usually do with couplers, you have to be careful with the couplers. First of all, you don't want to get a paint or anything that's too gritty into the working parts of the coupler. You don't want to get anything inside the draft gearbox, and that's just as true with weathering powders as it is with paint. Paint can cause the parts to stick together. Weathering powders, if they get inside that draft gearbox, can cause friction and will cause your coupler not to work properly. What I usually do is I have some washes that are a rust color wash, and I will apply them very carefully just to the outsides of the coupler. and it usually will take 2 or 3 applications of those. I'll apply the wash, I'll let it dry, apply the wash, let it dry. But that will get me that rusty color to the coupler on the outside. And again, as long as I'm careful, I don't get it into the working parts of the coupler or inside of the draft gearbox. But that's what I do. What I use is a kind of a dark, grimy rust color of a wash, kind of a darkish reddish brown. CONTAINERMAN68, Roy. Hey, I want to say first of all to Roy. Roy came through my town I guess a week ago yesterday, and unfortunately I was out of town. Roy, I'm sorry that I missed you, but I did appreciate the video that you shared of driving through my little town. Appreciate that. Roy says, do you flat coat first, add chalk pigments, and then another spray of dull coat? Yes, generally that's the case. In most cases, when I'm using weathering powders, I usually will use kind of a fade coat before I do the weathering powders. I use a fade coat a little bit on about anything. Here's an example. I'm going to come back to, actually not this one. I'm going to come back to this car again, just to show you a new red car, kind of what it looks like as far as the color is concerned. And then here's a car that was originally similar in color that I've added a fade coat to. Maybe I'll hold them up here kind of side by side so you can see the difference in color. They were similar in color originally. This has had a fade coat, which a fade coat in this instance is applied with an airbrush, and it is a wash of 10% flat white paint and 90% isopropyl alcohol. Apply it with an airbrush at a very low pressure, about 15 psi, and about 6 inches away from the model, so that you don't spray and spread and splatter that thin paint, the wash around, and just apply it very, very slowly and carefully and build up the color just to get that sun-baked faded look. Usually I will apply at least a light fade coat, which accomplishes the same purpose as the dull coat will. It gives the weathering powders a little tooth, to a little something to stick to. Now, if I didn't say it before, I'm gonna say it now. I much prefer, if I'm weathering plastic models or metal, I much prefer a weathering powder that is a paint pigment to a chalk. And the difference as far as brands are concerned, your artist's pastels, those are chalks. Your pan pastels are also chalks. Pan pastels work great on paper or on cardboard, or even on scenery. But I think we've all had that experience, if you've used pan pastels much at all, of applying it to a plastic model and then it rubs off real easily, or you get fingerprints in it. So you do what Roy just said. You apply the pan pastels and then you go over it with a dull coat, which will help seal it in. The problem is when you spray the dull coat all over it, most of the color of the pan pastel kind of disappears. So you have to apply it in several colors. You apply it and you dull coat it, and you apply it and you dull coat it, and on and on. Using a paint pigment weathering powder solves that problem. Monroe models, which is the same as the old AIM weathering powders, the exact same thing. Monroe bought AIM out a couple of years ago. Tamiya makes some paint pigment weathering powders. Bragdon powders are a paint pigment. They work exactly the same way as far as how they are applied, how they go on. The difference is these are made with a paint pigment, and so as you brush them in and work them into the plastic a little bit, they will stick just like paint. They won't rub off. They won't take fingerprints like the chalks will. So I really highly recommend on a plastic model using those kind of paint pigment chalks. Okay. Move along here. JC's Rip Track. Have you started with an undecorated model? John, I don't use a lot of undecorated models, but like that Fort Worth and Western locomotive that I custom painted, it started as an undecorated model. So I have done some undecorated models. And that, having said that bears mentioning. Most of what I do for weathering with paints and with the airbrush, I do with acrylics. Acrylics work fantastic for weathering with an airbrush. If I'm starting with an undecorated model and painting it, the basic paint coat I always do with an enamel. Personally, my favorite brand of those enamels for painting rolling stock is True Color. They're kind of expensive, but they are fantastic paints. They work really, really well. Sparky 107, good to see you in here tonight, which reminds me of something else I was going to mention here in a minute. Sparky says, when is the next Down and Dirty contest going to be? Everyone likes a good contest. Sparky, I am so glad that you asked that question, because I wanted to talk a little bit about contest. It seems to be contest season. Because I didn't write these down, so I hope I don't miss any, but I know Sparky, I believe, is running a contest right now that you might want to get involved in. Vinny, BNSF 6951, I believe, is running a 3,000 subscriber contest. Steve Brown over at It's My Railroad is on the tail end of a contest for his 5,000 subscribers. So I will encourage you to check out and support all of those guys. All three of those guys do live streams every week. Bless your heart. I don't know how you do it, but and in support of their channels and in support of those live streams, they're holding some great contests right now. So be sure and after this video is over, go check out those guys, check out those contests, and do what it takes to enter those. And since you brought up the Down and Dirty Weathering contest, now it might be a good time for me to say, I have decided I am going to hold a second Down and Dirty Weathering contest. It's going to be a little bit different this time, and I'm not going to get into all those details now, but I will tell you the contest itself is going to start in January, right after the first of the year. I'll be making an announcement about how the contest is going to work and the rules and all of that before that. It's going to be a simplified contest, not going to be quite as complicated as last year's was. I learned a lot from last year's contest. We're going to simplify it a little bit. But we are going to hold another weathering contest, Down and Dirty Weathering contest. And so I hope you all will look for those details. They'll be coming out late in the fall. Probably see those details coming out around Thanksgiving. We'll start that contest right after the first of the year. Thank you for asking, Sparky. Greg Gilbert, what's Ron's opinion on weathering Micro Trains cars that are part of a collection? Well, Greg, I would say that's a matter of personal preference, I guess. I don't collect any of those cars that are part of the collections. I know a lot of guys who do, and I guess that just depends on what your goals are for the collection. If your goal is to have a collection that you put on a shelf and you keep in, kind of mint, pristine condition, then obviously you're not going to want to weather those. But if you're putting those cars, from a collection on a layout that you want to run and to look realistic, you want those collection, cars, those specialty cars to look like cars that are actually, running on a real railroad in the real world, then yeah, I'd say you might want to at least do some weathering to them, just to give them a more realistic look. Again, that's all a matter of personal preference. I'm not really a model railroad collector. I'm a model railroad layout builder. I'm really interested in operations. I'm really interested in making things, kind of look realistic. That's kind of my thing. And that's not everybody's thing, and that's okay. But that's kind of my thought. Tom Pilling. I think I always pronounce your name wrong, Tom. Good to see you tonight, Tom. Tom says, Ron, what do you find is the best way to weather tank cars? Do you have any weathered tank car examples that you can show us? Oh, I so do, Tom. And let's see. Okay, you all will forgive me. I'm going to disappear from this frame for about 5 seconds. I'll be right back. I just pulled a Steve Brown. Steve, I don't know if you're watching tonight, but that one was for you. All right, let me show you a couple tank cars here. I hope you can see the difference of these on the camera. This is a brand new. This is an LPG tank car. This one is in new condition. I think I just pulled a piece of the piping loose. Come on. Focus, focus, focus. You can see black, shiny, new looking. Okay. Now, here is one that I have moderately weathered. I haven't done a lot of detailed weathering to it, but you can see what I really have done on this one in particular is faded the top. That's one of the first things you notice on a lot of tank cars is the top begins to sunbake and to fade. And generally what they will do, I cannot drop it, is from the line where the car would turn would turn upward and downward, whatever you would call that line. From there up, they will tend to fade, pretty quickly. And so I literally did this with an airbrush. I used a light gray paint in the same kind of a wash as I explained a while ago that I would use for a fade coat on any other car. But I did it basically from the top. Where's the car? There's the car. From the top down, spraying almost right down on it, a little bit of angle both ways to get that fading. Then, of course, with a lot of cars, especially if they carry petroleum products or gasoline, you'll get streaking down the sides from the dome. And don't think I have one right here at hand. I got several tank cars back here that haven't been weathered at all. I've got some, but I don't have them at hand. But some black streaking there, and that's really easy to do with just some black paint. You could use dark colors of the artist oils would work really well for that. If you had a black artist oil, a shiny black, or even the burnt umber would work on that black paint. It's going to give you that streak without coloring it. It's going to give you that streak look. And I have a super chat from Sparky 107. I told you you'd see my new bell, and here it is. Isn't that awesome? I don't know why I didn't use this before. We have that to take to our football games. Thank you so much, Sparky. Appreciate you, and appreciate that a lot. Sparky says, I want to see the new thing you have to recognize super chats. Okay, there you go. Better not be a Bud Light. It's not. My cowbell, my good old cowbell. I think that may be my new standard. Eric Hall says, Eric says, I told you so on the Down and Dirty Weathering contest, harder than you thought. Yeah, you did, and you were right. It definitely was a challenge. Hey, it was a learning experience. And I do want to, again, say thank you, to Eric for his help last year as I set up that contest. And, of course, Midwest Model Railroad for sponsoring the contest last year. So watch for details about that. Hey, one thing before we go any further, I do want to mention, as you think about weathering rolling stock, a lot of people are scared maybe to try their hand at weathering rolling stock because they don't want to mess up a model that they paid $15 or $20 or $30 or even more dollars for. So they just don't want to make a mess. This week I had the opportunity to go just for a couple of hours to a local train show. And one of the values of train shows like that have a lot of kind of a swap meet quality to them is you can pick up some stuff really cheap. I didn't get a lot this weekend, but what I did pick up was two. These are Roundhouse brand Canadian National box cars. Now, these cars, the prototypes, these were made, if you read on the details in there, these were made in 1970. These could technically run on my layout. They could be, very weathered old box cars that could still be running, and Canadian National would not be, a stretch for them to be running on the BNSF. I would want to do a lot to these before I put them on my layout because they've got horn hook couplers. I'd replace the entire trucks, upgrade the wheel sets, and I'd want to do a lot of other work to them. But the beauty of these is these are cars that have been around for a long time that aren't in demand. And the seller that was selling these, you can see the box right here, he had them marked for $8, and I bought them for $4 a piece. I bought two pieces of rolling stock for $8. That is some cheap practice material. And that's exactly why I bought these, was to practice some new weathering techniques. And if they turn out well, I'll put them on my railroad. I'll upgrade the trucks and put them on the railroad. If they turn out badly and I don't like them, guess what? I could take the trucks off completely. I could paint over the whole model and turn it into a boxcar storage shed somewhere. There's always something you can do with a cheap model like that. And so those inexpensive models that you can pick up at trade shows or garage sales or wherever you can find them are absolutely worthwhile, just as fodder to be able to practice techniques with. Okay. Kevin Knight says, say you have a black hopper and coal is black, would you think a heavier hand on the weathering would be necessary? Well, if you have a black hopper, coal hopper, I think primarily what you're going to want to do is on the inside, you're going to want to make sure that the inside is painted a real dull black. You might be able to accomplish that with dull coat, but I would say you probably want to get a really flat, dull black paint and paint the inside of it. And then I would streak a black car. I'm sure it has white lettering. And so you want to use maybe that same dull black color to streak the lettering on the sides. Probably, and this is a fact, that some of the hardest cars to weather are black or boxcar red. It's just harder to get the weathering to show up on those. And so I would come in, first of all, with that fade coat, just a light fade coat, use a light gray color in that wash, like I talked about with an airbrush, or you could use the technique like John Crowdis talks about in his video with the dots. You can do that. Fade the paint just a little bit. That'll allow your weathering to stand out a little bit. And then just use, some black streaks, maybe some rust patches on the white lettering, to weather a car like that. We're down to our last few minutes here. I'm not going to read that. We have one more comment. My moderators are trying to be helpful, I think. And we have another super chat from Roy, ContainerMan68. Thank you so much, Roy. Appreciate that. Appreciate you being here tonight. And I'm glad for that. All right. Well, it is, we're just coming right up to that hour mark. So we're going to start winding it down from there. But I want to thank you so much for coming and being a part of the live stream this evening. And if you are watching this on the replay and you've watched it all the way to the end, thank you so much for watching. I hope that some of these techniques that we've talked about and some of the question and answer tonight has been helpful to you. And I hope that you'll watch tomorrow and each Tuesday as I continue to bring you more great model railroad videos. Before I leave, I want to make one last kind of an announcement, just so you're aware. Those of you who have followed my channel for a long time know that from time to time, I lead some teams to do some disaster relief work. We had a group that went to Houston after Hurricane Harvey last year. I led a team to Puerto Rico this summer. And next week, I'm going to be leading a team to North Carolina to do some more cleanup work there. That being said, I'm going to do my best to keep my upload schedule as regular as I possibly can, because I know that you like to continue to see those videos on time. If I miss a video over the course of the next few weeks, you will understand why, and I appreciate your understanding. And I especially appreciate all of your support of me and of this channel. And I want to encourage you to be sure and let some of these model railroaders who have been an inspiration to you or an encouragement or just you've become friends with, let them know how much you appreciate them, because you never know what tomorrow holds. Well, be sure and watch each Tuesday as I bring you more great model railroad segments, and I look forward to seeing you then. By the way, Mark, M&M Rails, it's just coffee.